urge you to keep the faith.
Thank you both for those powerful, powerful statements, for your stories. And I will open it up in just a minute for some questions. But before I do that, I want to welcome to the podium Mr. Jim Cooper, Mr. Bill Dodd, Mr. Devin Matthews, and Dr. Susan Eggman. Thank you for joining us today. They are members of either BNP or of Jetty. You want to ask questions before you make your statement?
Let me join them together in the interest of time.
Okay.
To shorten them. And,
okay.
I want to thank both of you for being here today, Mr. Lee and Mr. James. And I also want to thank all the members of Business and Professions Committee and also Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy Committee, and especially the chairs, Chair Bonilla and Chair Garcia. For the Black Caucus, there's kind of method to our madness of why we're bringing all these groups together. Because once we get to a point, because this is really data collection, gathering information, but once we get to a point where we need to start pushing forth policy, the members that are here, and I'm so glad that you're here to hear this, the members that are here are votes that we need to be able to push forth our agenda. And so we do have, we're strategic in what we do. But most important, I think it's good for you as members of the legislature to hear from a community that you may not always get a chance to hear from, especially on something like this as Black enterprise. Whenever the Black Caucus has a discussion about education, which is our number one priority, I will tell you, it is our chair of Black Business Committee, CLBC, it's Cheryl Brown, that always pipes up and says, yeah, that's right, but what about business? And if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be staying on task. And I will say not only with the California Legislative Black Caucus, but when we're in Democratic caucus meetings, she will speak up for business in a heartbeat. And so I'm glad we finally got here, that we were able to have the discussion. And my question is more of it's kind of an observation and also kind of moving forward. For me, someone that kind of went through the drug area when we had crack cocaine and we just lost our mind and we started locking everybody up like mad, mostly African Americans. One of the things that always was interesting to me is we had a lot of young African American males that went into that business, and it's a business. And they started at the local level, and it went citywide. Sometimes they went statewide. Some went national. But they had no formal education. Some of them didn't even finish high school. But they knew marketing, accounts receivable, payable. They kept an inventory in their head. They were some of the most astute businessmen I ever knew. And many of them ended up in our prison system. We probably lost a generation of some really great entrepreneurs who, if they had had the right direction, the right resources, they could have quit Harvard like the person that started Facebook. They could have quit a lot of the institutions and not gone into. They could have started a computer system in their parents' garage and created Microsoft. They could have done all of that if they had had the right direction and a place to go. And so my question really is, and what I'm really concerned about, is how do we start to create, because we were talking about jobs, and we keep talking about jobs from established businesses that aren't majority African American. When do we start grabbing those young entrepreneurs and redirect them either in junior high school, elementary school, and redirect them to start their own businesses so they can hire other African Americans, and so that we can create our own wealth, so they can learn what wealth is. Because part of that number you see in wealth is not only owning your home, but owning a business. And this may be a question for everybody that comes up, but where do you see where we can start building that kind of infrastructure for the Black community?
I would say that your comments earlier about education, and I guess I'm partial to that, because if you look at my my resume that I submitted, it's heavily education. And that was my background, frankly, before I decided to leave early, relatively early, and then start my own business. So I think that education is extremely important to the success of the kind of endeavors that you're talking about. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that as well is because in my business, in the construction management business, at the management level are degreed people. They're engineers, they're construction managers. And I have been trying to talk to the community and also to black males in particularly about the opportunity that's in this area. And we simply, I recruit heavily for black males. And it's extremely difficult because they are unaware of this area, this particular area of endeavor. And it's really a great opportunity for a number of young men who are capable, very capable. And the individuals you're talking about, many of them are very, very capable individuals. No question about that.
Thank you. Ms. Burke, and then Mr. Gibson.
Mr. James, actually, you're the perfect person to ask something that I've been kind of trying to struggle with. So as someone in construction management, I'm just curious, as a minority-owned business, have you been given any information on how to participate in public projects as far as schools are concerned, especially as it regards to cap-and-trade funds?
Not cap-and-trade areas. Schools, yes, because I have relationships in that area, but not cap-and-trade.
And what would you think, I don't know how formal this is, but and what would you think would be the best way to get that information to those that are in your business, how to participate as a minority community in taking part in those funds? I happen to be chair of a committee of the Construction Management Association of America, the Southern California chapter. I'm chair of the CODE committee, and that's coordinating opportunities for diversity and equality or equity. And I would be delighted to have some of the information, and I think that's where we could start at least. This is a professional organization, and the emphasis is about construction management. This was a perfect place to start. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson, and then Ms. Campos.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Lee and also Mr. James for your comments. You know, I think it was Mr. James that talked about Proposition 209. We can tiptoe around this very delicately, but at the absence of 209, this is what we have right here. We have certainly a division, a lack thereof of participation when it comes down to not only government contracts, but all other contracts, especially when it comes down to African Americans. I've seen the disparity. You've also indicated, I believe it was Mr. Lee. You, Mr. Lee?
James.
Mr. James. When he talked about just the lack of representation, even on the California High Speed Rail Authority Board, right? We have to come and look at how do we, one, either talk about, have a real conversation about 209, because absent it, then we are still being disenfranchised. And it's hard to talk about, entrepreneurs for African American males when even if they were entrepreneurs, they still wouldn't get a fair chance in the entire scheme of things, right? So I think we need to have a real conversation on, one, how to look at bringing 209 or some form of 209 back to the table and have a real broad and robust conversation, because we have, again, seen time and time again that when it comes down to African Americans, we're still not treated with the same level of other people when it comes down to jobs and or opportunities. There's no way in hell you're going to tell me that
Take you off this coffee.
Okay. that when it comes down to government contracts, that African Americans who have these particular positions are not getting the information. Okay, not. I mean, so you're creating again a dichotomy that is unfair, unfair disadvantage. When you look at just government contracts, and we just heard from Mr. Lee, right? When it comes down to just opportunities around the Affordable Care Act and not being able to disseminate information to our community. Why wouldn't you want to give contracts to, firms that deal specifically with the African American community, right? It's a way to keep us in the dark, keep us silent, and keep us away from, opportunities that will help the entire community. And so we said high patrol and things of that nature. So my question is, with all that commentary, is what do you feel about when it comes to 209, the lack thereof, and being able to look at some form of bringing that back?
Well, I'm the one that brought up Prop 209 because I do think it is a very important and critical part of discussing California's history. Again, as I mentioned, when we did our publication in the late 80s, it was clear black businesses were booming. Black businesses were employing African Americans. Yes, we had other challenges and issues, whether it was, society's challenges and things like that. But you did not necessarily have what I would call almost a lack of hope for entrepreneurs in this day and age. There is the process of dealing with the state. It's in this post 209 era is intimidating and frustrating. The slow response to our community is painfully hard for our community, and so something definitely needs to be done, whether it's legislation or something. Again, you guys are on that side of this discussion, so I would hope that. From issues like this. I mean, and this is not the first time. I mean, like I said, we've been publishing 50 some odd years. And, I remember about 8 years ago or so, we had a discussion very similar to this with Curran Price when he was trying to address these issues as well, too. So this is, unfortunately,
It's systemic.
It is.
It's systemic.
It is. And unless we can change the system, there is not much that we can do other than suffer.
Thank you. Ms. Campos?
First of all, thank you for your comments and your stories and being very direct on what are the issues. I am listening to you, and this is not the first time that I've heard this in communities of color. We all seem to face the same issues, is that, I'm part of the system, I'm part of government, and being able to change the infrastructure where there is an infrastructure that has checks and balances so that we're not having to say, hey, we need to get our fair share, but that there's an infrastructure that has checks and balances that says, are you reaching out to the ethnic chambers and giving them the opportunity to be able to have an opportunity to have some of those contracts. The newspapers where you talked about, and I come from the city of San Jose, and being able to make sure that not only the big elephant in the room, but that the ethnic chambers or the ethnic newspapers have the ability to be able to receive some of those funds so that they can reach out to their communities, whether it's around Covered California or any of those other issues. So my question to you is, you currently know that the infrastructure to make sure that you're getting notified, that you have the ability to be able to bid on some of those contracts, whether it's in construction or making sure that you're receiving funds to be able to publish Covered California information or things. Have you studied what are some of the infrastructure things that we need to change within government that needs to be done so that there is a clear pipeline so that you're receiving that information or that you have access to at least bid on some of those contracts? I know it's kind of but I've been dealing with this for over 16 years in the city of San Jose, and I had to actually, it's a smaller scale, but I don't think it's any different when you have to go to the city manager and say, why aren't our minority businesses having the ability to build on these contracts that are $1 million contracts to build an infrastructure, whether it's, the city of San Jose or a BART project or a light rail project or any of those. So that's what I'm trying to understand, because just putting pressure when, I want a system that works if I'm not here or my colleagues are not here. Mm-hmm. And we're not continuing to have to reinvent the wheel and put pressure, but an infrastructure that works.
I can't speak for Mr. James's industry. I'm sure he'll address that. I know one of the areas that we've focused on or have had challenges within the ethnic press and black media in particular is, truthfully, is the third-party agencies that our state does business with in order to spread their message. So, for instance, if there is a particular message that's going to come out from, some grants or whatever it might be, whatever the information might be from the state, they will then subcontract with an agency, an advertising agency, that would then spread the message out. And truthfully, those agencies have done the state more of a disservice than a service over the years, because what they have a tendency to do is to do what we would call the same old kind of general market outreach, and so they will take those dollars. They'll take a portion of those dollars and build it into creative. They'll come up with something creative. I'm not dismissing the value of ad agencies at all. They'll do something creative, but then what they will then do is put most of the money into that. And then when it comes to the actual outreach, they will call our editorial department, send a press release or something like that. That is a low-cost effort on their part. And then use the advertising dollars to go into radio or television. And in California, there's only 2 black-owned radio stations in California. One is right behind me in the California Black Chamber of Commerce. And they won't utilize those. They won't utilize the black press. They'll utilize mainstream media, radio, and television, and assume that they will speak to our community that way. And unfortunately, like, as I said, that does the state more of a disservice than anything else. So I know that if there was a way to address, and really when it comes down to it, the boss in that exchange is the state. It's not the advertising agency, but the advertising agency will tell the state how to spend its money, and that is a problem. So the boss is the state, and the state needs to be able to, whether it's have some sort of metrics of some sort of system that can say, of the dollars that we're giving you, we want X amount to go to ethnic media, diverse audiences, whatever it might be, and then have an actual checks and balance system that would address that. And truthfully, we can find a way to help the state achieve what it needs to what it desires to achieve. But there is definitely a process that currently that in my industry that goes through that, and that does create a big challenge for us.
I know Ms. Eggman. I know Dr. Eggman has something to say and ask a question of you, but we are really far behind on this. That's why. And I know exactly what you're saying, but I think if we could do something in policy,
yes,
then that would be the way, because it doesn't matter who's here. Mm-hmm. If it's a part of the policy of this government,
absolutely,
then it would go forward and it would work. Yeah. But Ms. Eggman?
Just very briefly, and thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming. I'm Susan Eggman. I represent the city of Stockton and the area. So one of the things that I think would be helpful, especially some of us are going to be around here a little while, is to just have more coordination and interaction with members. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know my district pretty well. And I just met with somebody from the Strategic Growth Council about some of the money they're putting out, and they said, we had a meeting in Stockton last week. I'm like, well, who'd you talk to, and why don't I know about it? Right? Because I think if and that's an easy policy fix we can do, that contracts that come, programs that there should be some coordination, I think, with members' offices, and then we can help. Because, I mean, if you ask me, I know which organizations in my community can get the word out, and which ones take money and don't. And I mean, there's a lot of backstory that we all know that goes on in communities. So I just think that's just for all of to think about, if we could be a little bit more helpful in coordinating how information goes out, as we're going to be here a little bit longer.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We have to get on with the next panel. I'd like to thank you very much for. They usually say we're not allowed to clap in this room, so we just do like this. Believe it or not. Oh, yeah. I'd like to welcome up. I'd like.
We have two official.
Yeah, I would like to welcome up our next panel, who will share with us their experiences as franchise holders. Their bios are in the handout. One of them, Reginald Webb, could not be with us today because he had an accident over the weekend and is not well enough to travel. He sends his regrets, and I send my prayers. Mr. Lacey and Mr. Barnett, you both have 10 minutes, and we're going to stick to that 10 minutes. Please, timekeeper, if you would. And they're going to share their personal stories with us. You may begin.
How are you? Good. Go ahead. I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
How are you? Thank you so much for coming.
Right. Appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation.
You're Mr. Lacey?
Barnett.
You're Mr. Barnett?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So what I've heard earlier today is we really talked about business, job.
Can you bring that closer to you? Okay.
What I've heard earlier today, which is a recurring theme, is business, jobs, entrepreneurship. And background on myself and my partner, we are co-owners of PCF Restaurant Management, and that's a franchisee of Buffalo Wild Wings. We own Buffalo Wild Wings on Crenshaw and Baldwin Hills, in Torrance, in the Del Amo Mall in the South Bay, and also in Carson.
Is it Carson?
Carson, yes, sir, Carson. Yes, there you go. So the story, real quick, is we are one of, there's probably a little bit over 1,000 Buffalo Wild Wing units, franchise and corporate owned in the United States, and they're also international. And myself, my business partner, we're two of maybe say four African American owners. One is another one in the Houston airport, and then one in the Atlanta airport, and we're probably the only African American that actually has those are called special purpose Buffalo Wild Wings, the only ones that have physical locations out of the 1,000, and we currently have 3, and are going to do 3 more in the next few years. So with that being said, I look at it from a standpoint of being in the community. What I see is obviously African American community, you have a high unemployment rate. And it's a lot higher than the national average is. And gentleman said earlier, sometimes we hire the hard to hire, which is a definitely true statement. We give people chances that other people wouldn't give chances to. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. That's just the reality of hiring. And I look at it like there's obviously in Southern California, you have a minimum wage increase. And so that's not necessarily the issue per se to me. I'm all for people having wages that they deem reasonable. But the thing that I think is missed in that is when you look at businesses like restaurants that, entry-level jobs start at minimum wage plus tips or things of that nature, business owners are going to react to that. I think sometimes laws are enacted and it's not thought through with regards to what is the reaction. And when I'm saying business owners react to that is they're going to use technology, they're going to use other things. And what happens is those, like ourselves, we probably hire about 75 people per restaurant. So we have over 200 people employed with us right now. And so what will happen is you have margins, and your margins are your margins as a business owner. You in it to make a profit. So when things happen, whether it's health insurance or disability insurance, cost of doing business, you figure out, okay, how do I continue to run this business effectively and keep the margins that I want? So unfortunately, what happens is it creates a atmosphere where our group of people are going to get impacted the most. Yes, you'll have an increase in wages, but what will happen is now you're going to have, just an example, 4 people to do the job of what 8 used to do on that end. And so now you've just increased the population of unemployment. So again, we don't necessarily look at it that way. What we look at is we look at it a little different. How do we take what we do and be able to have a situation where we can decrease the unemployment of African Americans? And what I say is you have to increase entrepreneurship, and you have to also increase black business owners, because when you have that, then you'll have owners that will have hopefully a pool of young African Americans that they can hire and train, and hopefully one day those people that they hire go and open up their own businesses. What we've done is a couple of things I want to mention. At Dorsey High School in Los Angeles, California, myself and my business partner, on our own dime, we tried to do it another way and just got frustrated with the process and said, we'll just pay for it ourselves. We did a 16-week restaurant management training program with Dorsey High School seniors in their School of Business and Entrepreneurship. He and myself committed once a week every Thursday for 2 hours to teach this class of 30 high school seniors. They learned finance. They learned how to read a P&L. They learned marketing. They learned operation. And the whole program culminated with them running their own pop-up restaurant at their school that day. We had 300 people showed up, and they profited $3,000 at the end of the day. And after that, as an award, we took them to Dodger Stadium, and they got to meet the Dodgers below and afterwards. But what they did is they learned something. And again, we tried to, and it's not knocking any system, we tried to go through, and what we realized is you get bogged down in so much stuff and trying to make a difference that it's just like, again, we say, we'll do it ourselves. We'll foot the money up front and do it ourselves and then get this done. And we do it because it not only is it the right thing to do, is we're passionate about our community and our people. But you can't expect every business owner, even if they're African American, to feel that same way. So how do you incentivize other businesses to want to invest in the community like that? And also, too, what happens is you have, once they go through your system, you have a educated population of employable kids once they graduate. So I look at it whether it's through certain types of credits or programs or incentives, how do we release money or leverage money that the state have, local or federal government have, to really put together these programs where for-profit businesses can use this money, train African-American students, and then be able to have the unique position to actually employ them. A lot of programs that we have down in Southern California, they're great programs, but after they train the kids, they don't have the ability to hire them from anywhere. Not only do we train them, we are the owners of the company, so we're going to hire you and put you into our program. So once you're done here and you successfully complete it, we have a job waiting for you. And that's what we've done with the high school seniors at Dorsey, where we have several in our restaurant management training program. So that's how I look at it, Tom. As we continue to grow as business owners, we provide more job opportunities and continue to grow on that end.
You sound like you're growing your own, and that's something that we've done for a long time. We had to do it because there were no programs like that out there. So I am just, my hat's off to you. We're making notes up here because we're really excited about your program. That helps us. Anyone have any questions of? Mr. Barnett?
Loved hearing about your program. I do a lot of work on the veteran side, and we do a lot of similar programs where we grow our own, try to get them in. And the challenge that I've seen on that side is it's always been difficult, and we do a lot of work with EDD and stuff like that with veterans, and maybe that's something we need to look into for the issues here. But it's finding and filling those jobs. And so I think moving forward, looking into like benefits of the EDD and some other things on how we can help focus on, after these individuals are able to get training, then with job placement and making sure that there are programs lined up for them so they can pursue careers and move forward.
Mm-hmm.